Hi guys, welcome back to Tech Talks with Rachel. Have you ever wondered how to establish a tech company if you're not a technical person? Well, today I've got a CEO joining me. He is a property tokenization expert, and he's here to tell us a bit of how he explored tech as a non-technical CEO. Welcome, Ricardo.
Thank you for having me.
So, can you tell us a bit about yourself? Who are you, and what makes you you?
Great question. How to answer that? So I'm Ricardo. I consider myself an entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur. I've built, different businesses, throughout my life, and up until maybe 2019, 2019. That's when I actually got into, creating tech solutions as a way to really build something that's a lot more scalable, that reach a lot more people more efficiently.
So you've mentioned that you have recently gotten into like tech solutions, kind of entrepreneurship. What drove you to kind of go into a tech entrepreneurial space?
I feel like there's a wide market out there, and there are big problems that need to be solved. And, once you get that idea, you get that spark, you get that motivation to really solve that, tackle that problem, tech is usually the best solution for it, What I didn't know, going into it, what it really included, what do you really need to actually create this? And then, I just dived head first and, figured my way through it, really.
Okay, so I want to talk a bit about property tokenization and what it is. First of all, could you give us a bit of context as somebody who doesn't know anything? Let's say nobody knows anything about it. How would you explain it to a 5-year-old?
To a 5-year-old? So essentially, tokenization is really the form we use to fractionalize. When you want to fractionalize something, you take something that's whole and you split it up into smaller fractions. The tokenization part of it is just a digital representation of those fractions, which just allows people to invest and to own assets. Instead of having to own the whole thing, they can own a smaller fraction. That's something that they can actually afford, to invest in, and you can start small and essentially build over time.
So what solution or what problem does property tokenization bring?
The main solution is around the affordability. So, if we want to touch into it, briefly, I did some, research, but essentially like 20 years ago, 25 years ago, you can buy, an average property for £75,000, It seems foreign today, but, £75,000. But the average salary was what, 19,000. So it was only 4 times, your salary you can for an actual property. Whereas fast forward to today, the average property as of last week is £290,000, and the average salary is only £37,000. So in the space of that, 20, 25 years, the barrier to entry has doubled, literally. And if you want to, coupling, the cost of living increases and those type of things, owning property is now really inaccessible for the majority of the population. If you want to buy, a typical property, let's say it's 300,000, you need 75,000 to be able to build that, to be able to get like rental income, or to build your rental portfolio, sorry. Whereas with tokenization, we can break that down and really reduce those barriers. So instead of having to invest, tens of thousands, you can invest hundreds of pounds, thousands of pounds, and you can essentially access a wider pool of investors who can really take part and own this, asset class that's really now only positioned for the rich few,
Okay, so you decided as an entrepreneur to create an app that helps all these solutions that you're bringing into property ownership. How does that app work, and how did you put together a development team? How did you source that? For someone who's non-technical, because you don't have a development background or something technical, how did you wake up one day and say, I'm going to create this app?
I feel like it's a misconception that you need to be technical to have a tech company. I feel what's really most important is really having a deep understanding of the problem and having a connection to the people who experience the problem. So, you can easily get feedback and, create a solution that really helps people. The technical part of a tech company is really just a vehicle, you know. And for that, you can hire, you know, development teams. You can even, you know, go to an agency who can develop your solution. And even today, there's a lot more platforms out there where you can build apps and, you know, web applications using no code at all. So for my first company, my first tech company, you know, I was able to get a CTO who had that technical background, who was able to, you know, to lead that team and hire the right people, supposedly hire the right people to, you know, to build the platform. Is a lot more expensive, and essentially we ended up having to go back to no code tools to actually build that solution out anyway. You know, what's really important for the end user, for someone using it, is that it's, you know, user friendly, that experience is easy for them to, you know, use and get that benefit from the platform. All the tech behind it is important, but they're insulated from that, you know. And I think coming into it, you know, as a non-technical, you kind of, your mind's just bombarded with all the other things that you need to, you know, well, really, you just need to have a clean front end, which allows them to really get that benefit. In the back end, could be nothing. You know, you could be behind, you know, doing everything manually if you have to, you know. But yeah, it's not as hard as you think.
Have you ever been overwhelmed? Have you made any mistakes? Have you have you struggled in this tech world as a non-technical CEO?
100%, 100%. I think getting into it initially, I thought the best thing to do was to hire advisors, you know, find people who have, you know, been through this process before, who can kind of give you the advice and the connections to really make this work. And that doesn't always, you know, work out in that sense. Even dealing with agencies, you know, it can be tricky to find the right agents who can, you know, give you the right development team to really build what you want. And I think being a non-technical founder, you really have to dive in. You don't necessarily have to know how to code, but you'd have to know how to really project manage the team, you know, to have that, you know, agile frameworks and, you know, be attentive on those stand-up calls to make sure that everything's moving along as it should, having like really that hands-on approach. So I've made the mistake of hiring the wrong developers. I've made, you know, lost a lot of money, you know. They still charge you, even if they don't really deliver on what they're supposed to deliver. And I learned that you really have to be exact with what you want, you know, which can be complicated, you know. You just have to think about how the database would work and, you know, all these things that you kind of would hope that they would be able to, you know. So I've made those mistakes doing it, but now with that experience, I know kind of have a better idea of who is the real expert, you know, being able to really test out the platforms that they've built previously. I can now, you know, go into the back end a bit and, you know, have a look and see, you know, get a better idea of this type of person. And what's really then important after that is the communication. Can they really communicate?
I think it's really difficult, isn't it? Especially when when you don't have the experience of working in a development team, you actually don't understand what goes into building this product that the end product that you get, right? Because the end users will just download an app and they won't, they will never understand the journey that it's taken to have this app on the phone. Like the databases that you've talked about, even the data storage of these apps, and even the user journey that you're talking about, like being able to even use Instagram. I remember at the beginning of Instagram, it was such a basic application, wasn't it? Like you could just upload a picture or something. Now it's got all these features and all these filters, all these, and I think end users don't realize that when you get a new feature on an app, it's taken so much to build and to kind of refine, isn't it? So when you now become like the builder of these apps, you're like, oh my goodness, like the process is so complicated.
But I think it's important to start small.
Yeah.
A great example you mentioned with like Instagram. I was even thinking a few days ago about YouTube. I think next year would be like the 20-year anniversary, right? And I remember when it first came out and you know, watching videos on there to where it is today.
Yeah.
And it's a great lesson in just starting small.
Yeah, incrementally building your product, right? Because even Spotify, for example, we can see videos on Spotify. We've got lyrics on Spotify. When it first came out, it was just play a song and that's it. So now it's like really develops into this monster of a product that has so much integrated.
I think another key lesson is when you're coming into the space, or you found a problem and you want to create a tech solution for it. It's quite easy to go, I want something with all the bells and whistles. We need to, solve every single aspect of this problem within the first version that we want to build, which is really which is what I did before, but it's the wrong approach. You want to start with really the minimal viable product, the MVP.
Yeah.
Something you can actually bring to market really quickly.
Yeah.
Ideally, within a month, if you can, that's within 1 month to 3 months, if you can bring something to the market, and you've got a community of users who you'll be able to test it and give you feedback. Because as you mentioned with Spotify and YouTube and all these platforms, it's the feedback from the users which really adds
more features.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Because there's people, for example, who will watch a podcast on YouTube, and then now they can listen to it on Spotify, right? Download it, and now those same people who watch that podcast want to also watch it on Spotify, because then that way they don't need to go back to YouTube.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so yeah, it's really good to get that feedback from your customers. So what is your app then? What kind of features do you have? What have you been able to do? Because obviously it's a brand new baby.
Yeah.
And what has it got initially?
Well, luckily in this, you're able to invest in the properties. You can, log in, you can view the property you want to invest in, do all the research you need to do. And essentially you can, like from either your bank card or your bank account, or even your crypto wallet, you can actually invest in the property. Then if you want to sell it, there's a secondary marketplace where you can list it for sale and it could be bought, and the money goes straight into your wallet. Eventually, we would build in the functionality where you can have the additional perks of ownership, which means depending on how much you own within the resort, you can get discounted stays within there, or even complimentary stays within that resort. So it's like a digital voucher that we're introducing to the platform. So yeah, essentially you can invest and make money and build your portfolio over time.
Let's say I download your app. What's the kind of first step then? Is it more of a registering who I am?
Yeah.
And then what's the process in terms of security that you've gone through? Because obviously if you're buying properties, you're going to have to put your legal details on there.
Yeah.
So how complicated was that? What kind of legal side of things did you have to make sure was considered when you were building this app?
That was really the biggest challenge, especially how we're taking on properties in different regions of the world. Ideally, we want to be able to market it globally, so anyone around the world.
Okay, so this is going to be able to buy property anywhere in the world?
Yes, essentially, yeah.
Okay.
So we focus on luxury resorts. So what I personally do with my experience in, sourcing opportunities for investors, I connect with developers who are developing these resorts. We negotiate a great deal and, all the complimentary perks that we can offer for investors. And then I bring it to the platform, which allows people to invest in those assets. So in terms of like the security around it, the tokenization part of it really provides the foundation for the security. So all the transactions are recorded on the blockchain. Any token that you buy, you can query and you can see, everyone who's owned it prior to you, for example. In terms of doing the transactions, they're all peer-to-peer. So there's no essential middleman within that. It's within your wallet towards another person's wallet. And you would just, do the transaction. We just facilitate the actual property itself. So it means that all the compliance around the property, around the token's already done. So you can just essentially log in and invest. So all that stuff is done on the front end of the actual deal.
Do you have much competition in other apps in the industry?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
So how we kind of differentiated ourselves is, for example, if you like, commercial property, for example, there's a tokenization platform out there where you can invest in just commercial properties. Or if you like, single family homes, you want to invest in that, there's platforms where you can do that. Where we kind of differentiated ourselves was really in the hotel and luxury resort sector. Because I didn't necessarily want to just create a commodity where you can invest and make money. I want you to have that really emotional connection so you can actually go and have holidays in the properties you own, And then really just touch on the security aspect of it. Each token we have to, well, essentially any investment product, are heavily regulated around the world, especially places like the US, which is like the main market for these type of products. So you have to register them as securities with the SEC, So it gives the investors a bit more security around the investments, but there's a lot more restrictions with how you can market, these offerings, who you can sell them to. I mentioned before, like the holding periods, you have to hold it for at least a year before you can sell it. These type of things that they put around this type of, the investments to protect investors, essentially.
I want to circle back to what you said earlier. You said something like, now you know the right developer to hire and the experts. How did you get there? Did you have to upskill yourself a bit in the technical world of things? So maybe did you learn how these things come together, whether it was coding or whether it's a technical upskill, or how did you go about that?
So I think a lot of it comes down to not necessarily it's like the soft skills, you know. So you want to find someone who can really, communicate effectively, someone who's got a good track record in building solutions. And for me personally, being able to deliver, I think there's a lot of developers who can code, but it's being able to deliver the product at the end, which is like the biggest challenge. Some people really get, caught up on bugs and those type of things and how you kind of navigate through that. So I suppose the skills that I have to develop was, I said, like managing the actual project myself, being on top of things and making sure that, they're doing what they need to do to solve these problems. So that I don't know how to like review code, for example, or anything like that. So use experts for that part of it. But in regards to getting a good feel for the actual person, that's what, I've been able to learn over time.
Okay, so in terms of the technologies that you are working with or what you're trying to develop, where do you see what you're doing in the next, say, 5 to 10 years? Where is it going to evolve into? What do you want it to look like?
Well, now, I think having digital assets as an asset class in itself is growing, As I mentioned, like a lot of, say, the younger generations are locked out of, the real world physical assets. So they turn to digital assets. And as that becomes more commonplace, I feel the regulatory environment around it will start to relax because it has to then adapt to, the demand for it in that sense. So I feel like it become more commonplace and there'll be more things being tokenized. I mean, you can already buy, tokenized fine art. So if you want to invest in an expensive painting, for example, you can own a token within that. Even like luxury watches, there's already platforms where you can invest in. If you look at watches as an asset class, you don't have to go out and buy the whole watch and store it and insure it. You can just buy a tokenized version of it, which is held in a vault somewhere, and so this will become more commonplace, and people start building portfolios and really building their wealth around it.
Okay, I like that, and I think. Do you think the normal properties are probably going to turn into one of those kind of, you buy a share, because I think that's shared ownership already, right? So do you think it's going to go down that direction as well?
Yes, I think eventually.
Okay.
I think eventually. I think at the moment the best applications for these type of like properties are ones that you don't have to manage yourself, for example. But I do see a future where people are able to really liquidate, so let's say you own a property, for example, instead of having to go to, your mortgage broker or your lender to, release any equity on the property, you can actually maybe tokenize it and, be able to get some equity back out of that, or someone else would actually buy into it, Things like that, where people can liquidate assets a lot easier on the blockchain in terms of like, normal housing. But I think the main application will probably stick around, commercial properties that you don't have to manage yourself, that could generate, rental income on your behalf.
Yeah, I'm really interested in that idea. And I think for me, because investing is really scary as well, and you don't want to put in too much money. So I feel like in terms of commercial investing and slightly different investment, because there's things like ISAs and those kind of things, but maybe with the perks even that you mentioned about being able to own a property or part of a property and being able to stay there and build that generational wealth whilst you're also able to enjoy your investments, because you don't physically really engage with investments, right? Sometimes,
Exactly,
especially
yeah.
the ISAs, like
Exactly.
they're just kind of these things that, okay, I invest in the biggest, you know, maybe Apple, but you don't really feel part of it.
It's weird because so when you have like properties, you have like direct ownership where your name's
Yeah.
on the deed, you own that property. If it's a rental property, you own, you appoint a
see it.
manager. So, but you have that emotional connection to it.
Yeah.
Whereas when you have like indirect ownership, it just becomes a commodity. Where I feel like I wanted to also be able to create something in the middle where you can have that emotional connection to it. You can go and experience it and enjoy the wealth that you're building, but also have the return on investment on the other side, which is obviously enhancing your lifestyle,
Yeah. So in terms of like any technologies that you're using to inform your decision making, is there any particular, I don't know, insider, maybe you can't tell me, but is there any insider technologies that inform your technologies that you're going to implement on the app to help people, say, have views of, like, let's say the value of the investment or where it's going, or even the flow of the application? Is there extra technology that you're using to inform those decision making?
We use AI a lot,
Okay.
for like research and those type of things.
Okay.
In terms of really being able to, reach the right people, we use AI a lot as well. And I mean, in blockchain, the main application in blockchain is decentralized finance, right? So in terms of like other ways we can, integrate new solutions into that, for example, already, if you have digital assets, you can actually borrow on your assets much easier than having a physical asset. So being able to introduce those type of technologies within the platform is something that we plan to integrate eventually, so people can build their portfolios and not have to sell or be forced to sell to be able to take any profits or be able to have capital themselves. They can just borrow and access it.
Can you tell me a bit more about the AI side of things? Like what kind of what does that look like in terms of informing your decision making?
I think eventually what we want to do is have it so in terms of, over time, for example, we'll have more data on the actual property. So how much, the occupancy rates, for example, how much it generates. So being able to offer that in real time, for example, imagine we have, hundreds of properties on the platform. You can make a much more informed decision based on your investment criteria. So let's say you put in, I don't know, I want to invest, or just invest for me, for example. I want you to invest for me for properties that have a certain occupancy rate, ROI, and the AI would basically make decisions on your behalf, assessing all the data that's there. Instead of you manually going through it, it will be able to essentially automatically invest on your behalf for you. So these are things that's already in place on certain blockchains. You can create AI bots. In a real estate application, I haven't seen it been done yet. So it's something that hopefully we can, integrate.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I feel like if AI could make these decisions for me and hopefully predict my return of investment, then I would literally have a bit more confidence to be able to like part ways with my money, especially in property, because it's so unpredictable. And if you make the wrong investment, you probably end up losing money at the end of it. So you wanna be sure you're making the right investment. So I'm really interested in that.
Yeah, I think that's the future that we can all look forward to.
Yeah.
I said AI agent, AI bots are already,
they're already there.
There. I think I did some research in a blockchain called Base, and they introduced an AI agent, and apparently within 3 minutes you can actually create this. So I think the beauty really about this technology that it's accessible. So as I mentioned, you don't need to be technical at all to be able to access the technology and be able to, a bit like ChatGPT, you don't have to be technical to use it, for example. So it really makes everything accessible for the everyday person to create these type of solutions for themselves.
Okay, so if there was any top advice, career advice you'd give to somebody who's waking up today and they're like, I'm gonna start a company, that's probably me actually. I'm trying to, okay, what advice would you give me in terms of starting a company, let's say I want to create an app. I recently went to Malawi and I was really frustrated, really frustrated. I want to create an app that is centered on the public transport. So it helps people get the minibuses, helps people book maybe their Ubers, because there's no Uber in Malawi at the moment. So it's just really frustrating. So if I was to create an app and I don't know anything about tech and I just want to go there, put a team together, what advice would you give me?
I would say like free platforms like Figma, for example, where you can probably hire a designer, a UI designer, UX designer who can create a prototype for you pretty easily, right? Pretty quickly and cheaply. And I would take that and really reach out to the people in Malawi who are experiencing this problem and get them to use the prototype. So it doesn't have to be like functional, but to be able to click through, to be able to, and get that feedback from them. Would you use it? If you could use it, how much would you pay for it? And I think a lot of the work would be primarily based on getting a good understanding of how you can really solve this problem. You've identified there's an opportunity there, but you really want to understand the problem deeply, because you don't want to end up spending money creating something that nobody's actually
gonna
wants.
use.
Exactly, or it doesn't really solve their problem.
Yeah.
And I think, it's easy to really get excited about, doing it and wasting a lot of time and money, where really for free, or really for not a lot of money, hundreds of pounds, for example, you can create something, even a landing page, create a landing page which we're creating this solution for this particular problem. Here's a form that you can fill out and join the waiting list. So this is where I started. You send it to people who would experience this problem. You get them to fill out the form to join if they're interested, and you're just collecting data. You speak to them, collect more data, send them a prototype, collect more data, and really just hone in on getting a good understanding of how to do it before writing any line of code.
Okay. See, this is the difference between me and you. I feel like you're a real entrepreneur. You don't want to waste the money on creating this whole app, because I would have wasted my money creating this whole app, and then people are like, we don't really want to use it, because that's what's happened. A lot of apps have come out in the South, not just in Malawi. I've heard there's some apps that came out in Zambia as well, but then people ended up not using it, and then it just went stale because it was probably an app that wasn't solving the right issues, right? So the locals were like, no, we don't need this. We'll stick to what we've got. So it's like, we need to create the solution that's going to help everybody the way they want it to be helped. Because I think sometimes you find a solution for you, but then it's not what they want.
Yeah,
They're not asking for that.
Exactly. And even when you go to like other parts of the world where things like Uber that we use every day, for example, you go to parts of the world where they don't have Uber, it'd be easy to create a Uber there,
something
or a version,
similar.
but then it depends on the people there, But I think even with that, sometimes you can start small. So even with property tokenization, for example, my first version of this, which I did in 2022, it's quite a foreign concept now. It was even more foreign at that point. Sometimes it takes time for people to really catch on to new technologies and those things. So I think, for example, with Uber, they started just in San Francisco at the start to solve that problem there specifically. So even in Malawi, if there's parts of Malawi which maybe it's more remote and it's difficult, could start there. Let's focus on solving the problems for this community here, and then being able to learn from that experience, and then build it out over time. Because it can be, you can spend a lot of money and get no traction, and then you kind of lost really.
Yeah, I think that's the fear that a lot of people have, especially going into tech, because a development team costs a lot of money.
Yes.
So investing a lot of effort into a development team is a lot, isn't it? Like, you don't want to, especially if your budget is limited as well, you don't have a sponsor, or let's say somebody does sponsor your project, you don't want to lose their money and say, oh, soz guys, it didn't work out.
It definitely happens. And I think another good lesson is sometimes, if you go cheap, sometimes you pay for it twice, So you can go and find developers, and if I want to do it within my budget, sometimes it's better to,
fork a bit of money out.
And
do it right.
Exactly, and do it right the first time.
Yeah.
But I think today, for example, I think building like software solutions are much more easier
Than
you know,
before.
100%. I even saw an AI platform, a website that you can use to build apps.
No way.
You put with prompts,
Wow.
and you literally layer your prompts for the different aspects of it, and it will like write the code and create it for you. So I didn't actually see it all the way through to the end to see what product but in terms of, if you can do, even if that takes you, in terms of time that you'll save there, it's going to save you months, for example. But even that takes you halfway towards your product, for example, and you might have to do a bit more on the front end and fix a few things. That's going to save you so much money and effort, to build these platforms. And 5 years from now, not even 5 years, 2 years from now,
Yeah.
you can prompt it and build your whole platform easy.
Okay, so are you intimidated by that as an entrepreneur
Pardon?
are you intimidated by that as an entrepreneur in the tech scene? Like, do you feel like everything's going to be there now, like soon?
I think it's great because people like myself, entrepreneurs, it means that especially like entrepreneurs that bootstrap. So imagine that when I first was getting quoted to build this platform, you're talking hundreds of thousands, right? So now being able to create solutions with, let's say, tens of thousands or even single thousands, it makes a lot of these things more accessible. So long as you can solve that, you can solve the problem, you can test it much easier,
Yeah.
and much more cost effective. So more competition is great, really. It means you have to be on your toes more. It means you really have to hone in on the problem, on the people.
Provide a really good product, because
Exactly.
otherwise everyone else is doing it, so you might as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Okay, so what does the future look like for you? Are you sticking to property tokenization, building that, and just kind of like making sure that becomes, I guess, the bigger application that we're talking about, like iterating different features
Exactly,
and things like that?
Yeah, as I looked at the YouTube example, of what they've managed to build over 20 years,
Yeah.
and a lot of times we get caught up, in a kind of short-term spans.
Yeah.
And obviously property is a long-term investment regardless.
Absolutely.
So I look at it as a way that I can use all my skills that I've developed, being in property investing, that over years I can, build this portfolio and really help people, gain access to wealth over time. Where it will evolve into, I don't know. But at least, for the foreseeable future.
I love that. So how do people connect with you? Where do people find you?
I think the main platform to connect with me on is LinkedIn. I'm probably most active there. I've got Instagram, but I'm not as active on that platform. So yeah, LinkedIn's the best place to contact me.
Well, thank you so much for joining. I've really enjoyed
Thank
this
you for
chat.
having me.
I think the future is really exciting, and I love that you're actually creating these kind of solutions through tech, because people like me can actually invest in commercial property, and I'm really excited to actually invest in one of your commercial properties, and I'll be like, I'll be staying there like half the year, because when winter hits England, I'll be on that resort.
Yeah, that's the vision we're building.
I love that. I'm so excited, and I can't imagine like what that's like to just land in a country and be like, I own property here.
Yeah.
That's sick.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you for tuning in, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed that, especially if you're a non-technical CEO. Hopefully that's given you a bit of motivation. Please connect with Ricardo and check him out on the website. I'll see you on the next one.